Hi everybody, welcome back to Grammar Part 2. When we left off, we were talking about commas and how important they are to understanding the meaning of a sentence. And I left you with the thought of, if you're not sure whether a comma belongs in a sentence or not, just change the sentence. When you have a chance, I want you to read my comma joke about the panda. So pause the video and then come back, since I'm not going to spend the time reading it to you. All right, pretty funny, right? But you can see the importance of having a comma in the right place. So let's go over some of the key comma rules, understanding again there are many comma rules, and I'm not going to have an opportunity to go over all of them, but I do want to go over some of the key comma rules. So I'll start with this one, which is, when do we use commas in a sentence? Okay, so when we think about our sentences, think about simple sentences. Simple sentences are ones that have a subject and a verb. In the English language, that's all you need to make a sentence, a subject and a verb, like Hallie walked or Hallie baked a cake. Pretty simple. When we start getting two subjects in the sentences and one predicate of the sentence, things get a little bit more complicated. Here I've inserted my son because he also really loves to bake. So Hallie and Adam baked a cake. Don't need a comma there at all, right? Seems really clear? With me so far? All right, let's keep going. Now, let's talk about when we have one subject. So here there are two subjects, Hallie and Adam, but we'll just go back to one, which is me, Hallie. But instead of having one predicate, we're going to have two subjects of the sentence. So, for example, we could have had Hallie studied and read her book. So we have the same person doing two things. Hallie studied, Hallie read her book, but we're going to do it as one sentence, which is Hallie studied and read her book. We can also see by some examples here that having one subject with two predicates doesn't have to be one sentence. Hallie studied and read her book. We could have had Hallie washed the dishes, period. Hallie folded the laundry. Could be two separate sentences. Could be one long sentence like this. Hallie washed the dishes and folded the laundry. Hallie washed the dishes but did not fold the laundry. That's actually more likely to be true. I don't mind doing the dishes, but I do mind folding laundry. So when we look at sentences like this, what do they all have in common? Is one subject. In every one of these examples, there's just one me and two predicates, two subjects of the sentences. But we still don't have any commas. Do you think any of these sentences need a comma? Probably not. But let's complicate these sentences a little bit more if I scroll down. So when do we use commas? So a big piece of understanding when we use commas is looking at our sentences and trying to ask ourselves, are these independent clauses? Meaning, can the clause or the sentence stand on its own with no additional punctuation? Or are there dependent clauses? Dependent clauses that need another part of the sentence to help connect them. And here is one important grammar rule relating to commas. And again, you don't have to memorize these, but just be familiar with it. When you are linking two independent clauses, meaning the clauses can stand alone with no additional punctuation, when they are linked together, we do use a comma when we are using what we call the fanboys. And fanboys stands for, and, nor, but, or, yet, or so. So here's a really good example. I'm actually going to go down to, actually you can look at any one of these. It was snowing, comma, so I wore my winter boots. I'll edit this for a second. If you had a sentence that said it was snowing, that's an independent clause, right? And you could also have another sentence called I wore my winter boots. Those together are two independent clauses. They don't need any additional punctuation. And in your writing, you could have two sentences back to back that just says it was snowing, period. I wore my winter boots, period. And that would be grammatically correct. However, you may want to link these two thoughts together, right? It was snowing, and then the reason you're wearing your winter boots is because it was snowing. So for style reasons, you may want to link these sentences together with the word so. It was snowing, so I wore my winter boots. Grammar rules will tell us that when we link these two independent clauses together, using one of the fanboys, and so is one of them, we require the comma before that second linked sentence. It was snowing, comma, so I wore my winter boots. So it's the same thing again down here. Let's say, you have one subject in here and it was me, but take these sentences here while, actually I'm going to go down to this one right here. Hallie washed the dishes and Adam folded the laundry. Hallie washed the dishes, but Adam folded the laundry. Hallie washed the dishes, so Adam folded the laundry. All of these sentences are two independent clauses linked together. I'm just going to scroll up by one of the fanboys. And when you have a fanboy linking sentences, you need a comma right before the connecting word. That's what all of these have in common. Now, a couple of the other examples in here have different types of dependent clauses. I'll take this one, for example. Let's look at these two. While Adam folded the laundry. Is that an independent clause or a dependent clause? That one sounds like it's dependent because it can't really stand alone, right? We don't say while Adam folded the laundry, period, and that's a complete sentence. What about Hallie washed the dishes? Well, that one is a complete sentence. But we could link these two, and we would still need a comma to clarify the connection between these two. So this would be another example of using the comma, not because we're linking two independent clauses, but because one of the clauses is dependent on the other, and we need the comma for clarification. So I'll go back to something I said before, which is, if at any time you don't like one of your sentences, if you're looking at this and you're like, I don't know if I need a comma or not, just break it into two different sentences. Hallie washed the dishes, Adam folded the laundry. The meaning of the sentences is essentially the same. A lot of this is just style related. So don't feel like you have to, follow, you have to link together the two sentences. You may not want to. You may want to keep them independent. The other piece, I have a couple other things I want to say about commas, but I certainly want you to pause the video here if you're having any questions about these examples, and let me show you where on the web you can find more examples like this. Plus, the chapter in your book on grammar has some really good examples on linking independent clauses like this, which have the fanboys linking them together. Before I move on and talk about the two final quick comma rules that I see commonly misused, I want to just toggle over and show you a really comprehensive, wonderful website that is sponsored by Purdue University, which is in Indiana. So Purdue is well known for something called the OWL, which is their online writing lab. And I thought I was right on that page, but now I see that I'm not on the page. But if you go to, here it is. This is linked right on your Blackboard page. It's called the Purdue OWL, Online Writing Lab. And it is the most comprehensive, free legal resource for all questions related to grammar and writing. And what you can do with the Online Writing Lab is you can come down here on the left and look for, let me see, it is under General Writing. And then general writing, there is something called grammar and then punctuation. So if you go to punctuation, there is a whole section just on commas. So again, don't feel like you need to memorize this, but it will go over the key comma rules. Here's the information that we were talking about with fanboys and how to use commas otherwise. So feel free to consult this resource as more information if you're looking for some help on understanding how and when to use commas. The last two comma rules I want to introduce you to that are really important is understanding the use of semicolons and something called the Oxford comma. The semicolon looks like this. It looks like a comma with a period on top of it. You may have seen this in writing before. A lot of people don't know when to use a semicolon, and I'll give you a couple of important hints. Number one, you don't ever have to use a semicolon. It is truly just for style purposes. And we use it any time that you could use a period, you could use a semicolon instead. So again, to go back to my example about snowing in winter boots, it is snowing, period. I wore my winter boots. So there's lots of ways that you could rewrite this. It is snowing and I wore my winter boots. It is snowing, so I wore my winter boots. You can make it one sentence that way, linking with a comma. But you can also choose to link with a semicolon in place of the period. It is snowing, semicolon, I wore my winter boots. Now, if you wanted to put the word so I wore my winter boots, then you would need to include the comma, because you have one of the fanboys there. You have so. But if you decided you didn't want to use the comma and the fanboy and you wanted to use a period instead, you could do that, or you can use the semicolon in place of the period. Why would you want to use a semicolon? Emphasis or style, two ideas are linked together and you just don't feel like using the comma. It is snowing, semicolon, I wore my winter boots. Play with it if you want, but know that you are never required to use a semicolon. The last, but one of the most important rules about commas is something called an Oxford comma. You may see some public debate about whether an Oxford comma is required. I personally am a believer in the Oxford comma, and I will insert it every time into your legal writing. An Oxford comma is the comma you use when you are making a list of things. You may have heard that one of the uses of commas is when you are linking and listing items. I went to the store to buy bananas, apples, and grapes, right? So I'm listing the things that I am buying. And we break those off with commas. Now, sometimes people write things like, I like bananas, apples, and grapes. And they omit the second comma so that the two items are linked together. I know that some of you have seen this. It is really common. However, it does change the meaning of the sentence to omit the comma. Here is the problem sentence. I like my parents, comma, Elton John and Lady Gaga. Now, I know if you could respond to me over this video, you would tell me that this sentence implies that my parents are Elton John and Lady Gaga, right? I like my parents, comma, Elton John and Lady Gaga. I promise you those are not my parents. However, I think a better sentence would be, I like my parents, comma, Elton John, and Lady Gaga. And now you can see that there are three distinct items or individuals in a list. So I always like to use that third or that second comma that separates the second and third item in a list. I know with a sentence like I like apples, bananas, and grapes, it doesn't seem like it's necessary, but you can easily see why it is critical to have that other comma there. Now, if you really don't believe me, take a look at the article that I've linked on your Blackboard page called The $5 Million Oxford Comma. This is a true court case out of the state of Maine where a statute written by the legislature was being debated as to the meaning of overtime and when certain truck drivers were entitled to overtime. And there was a missing Oxford comma in that sentence, and it led to a $5 million lawsuit. So just because you might think that Oxford commas are not necessary, they really are, and they are critically important for seeing what the meaning of a sentence is. So I just have some funny Oxford comma memes, but in all seriousness, I really do believe that Oxford comma is critically important. So clearly those are not the only comma rules, the one about when we link independent and dependent clauses together, when we use a semicolon, when we use the Oxford comma, but these happen to be ones that I see misused most oftenly. But do check, look at the OWL website, look at the examples in your book, and see other examples of misuse of commas. I will make one more grammar video, and this one will talk about apostrophes and plural words with apostrophes. And then we will have hit kind of the big offensive grammar rules that I've seen from time to time. So I'll see you on the final video.